What's up, world? Welcome to the Rooted Real podcast. I'm your host, Carlie. Here we ask real questions with real people about the real world. So let's jump right into this week's episode of the Rooted Real podcast. What's up, guys? Welcome to the Rooted Real podcast. I'm your host, Carlie Dill, and we are here with my friend, Hudson Hopper.
How's it going? I'm excited to be here, Carlie.
Guys, Hudson's one of my best friends. I'm so glad he's here. And guys, it's the second time we're trying this. But so this is
I get to re-say everything. It's good. I'm excited because I'll do it much better. And it's not at 11 at night.
And there's not a dog. And like that last time, the experience was interesting. It was a memory.
It was great. It was great. A memory working through that memory.
But we're back. We're back. Today's the day. We're here with Hudson Hopper. Hudson, okay. Tell the people, who are you? Why do I know you? Just like give me a quick like.
Yep. Totally. My name's Hudson. I live in LA. I met Carlie here. We're both from Texas originally. I work I work in the film industry here as a first AD and director, but more importantly, I love talking to creative people about how to live a meaningful life, and we talk a lot about that. So.
Yeah, and Hudson is one of my good friends. Him and his 8 roommates are like my best guy friends here. And Hudson, me, and like a couple other people, we lead like kind of like a young adult ministry here in LA. That's like really cool, and we have just seen that grow. I feel like we just get to do a lot of like ministry together and stuff together. So Hudson, I look up to Hudson a lot, and I was literally thinking when I started this podcast, I was like, who do we need? We need people like Hudson. Like Hudson's so underrated. I'm like, we need like you and the Reese blew up on social media now, but like, you know, I'm like, these are the people that should have 1 million followers. Like, I just don't understand. Like, everyone needs to hear what you guys have to say. I just think you bring so much value. So I'm so happy that you're here. Okay, to dive in, Hudson. You work in the film industry, okay? Yep. We're in film, I'm in film, we're in the entertainment industry, super cool. I'm really curious. We're kind of just hopping in here, guys. Bear with me. When you talk about your industry or other industries, you're a believer, you're a Christian, but you also are like really hardworking and work, you know, in a normal job. You know, we don't work in the church or have any desire to work in the church. I'm curious, when you're setting goals, and how old are you?
26.
I always think you're like 30 for some reason. It's giving 30, but not in a bad way.
I'll take 30, yes.
Not in a bad way. I just think Hudson's so wise. But I'm trying to think how to phrase this. How do you decide like what the path to success is for you? When you're from where you're at now to where you want to be, where do you feel like you're at now and where do you want to be? And what path is it, and what is success to you that you're working towards?
Yeah.
In theory.
Yeah, totally. What I talk about a lot, and what I think how I view success is if I'm able to live a life that aligns with the things that I value, like if I'm able to live a life that's able to spend time with family, work on stuff that I find exciting and meaningful, be able to hang out with other people, and not feel like overly stressed by finances, be able to be connected to a local community, that's success to me. And I know that's different than a lot of people. It's like, I need this end goal, I need this thing, which those are awesome, and those can be elements. But I think too often, especially in the creative industry, we pick just one thing and we say, okay, this is my passion. I got to make it as a singer-songwriter. And if I don't make it as a singer-songwriter, or if I don't make it as a fine artist, then somehow I'm not going to have lived a successful or meaningful life. And those elements like are real things that we should pursue and go for, but those don't make the totality of a life. And so many things that we value, if we can make sure that we focus on those and build a life around those things versus just building a life exclusively around our passion. So that's like, for me, I want to be in a place where I'm not worried about money. That doesn't mean I make a huge amount of money. I don't spend very much money. And so I'm just like on the frugal side of things. So it's like, I don't have to make that much to be in a place where I don't worry about it. But not having that stress, I want to be in a place where I can really show up and be with my like community and be connected to a community of believers and not feel like I have to travel all the time. Because I'm seeing a lot of people, especially as we're getting a little bit like older in the late 20s, people that are like, okay, I'm considering having a family here and there's this project I have to leave for 3 months. And it's starting to conflict with how they should approach that because initially everything was built around just passion. And this is the big passion project and this is what's going to happen. But that makes it a lot harder when you have to deal with those questions.
Yeah. And I think it's also interesting, like, but that's so good. That's so good. And I think how you define success, like you said, is so different than how most people define it with money or following or, you know, the brand you work with or whatever. Like yours is more lifestyle, right? But I also think more and more people would agree with that. You know, I think more and more people would lean that way. And that's really interesting that, you know, freedom is like the new currency, right? Like freedom and flexibility is what people would take over $1 million a lot of the time, you know, over $1 million salary, but having to work 80 hours a week, you know?
And even in that, I think there was like early 2000s, everything, and like what I grew up like was at the tail end of everything was passion centric lifestyle. Find your passion, and you'll like if you find what you want, then you'll never have to work a day in your life. And then you start working, and you're like, this isn't fun, even though this is what I love.
What I'm passionate about.
Yeah, it is what I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
And so I think as that movement fell away, there was a replacement of like freedom. Ultimate freedom is going to give me happiness. But for me, the value isn't ultimate freedom either. Like some people think if I can just get financially free where I have so much in the bank that I can just like work 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours a week. And then they like disregard that part of the things that makes a life meaningful and valuable is that feeling of work. And so they get to that point. And so then you have founders right now all the time who have like made it. They're big, they're huge, and they're asking these questions of like, so what's it all about? Why am I here? Because they hadn't built around as much of, hey, here's where I want to position my life and build up these meaningful value points. It was still just like make a lump sum of money, no longer have to work, feel free. But freedom actually like really breeds anxiety if not done well. Yeah.
That'll preach. Okay, that's good. Wow. Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like I feel like I even experienced that like last year when I was freelancing and I had all the freedom and I was making enough money. It wasn't that, but I was like, this just like anxiety inducing. And then I have a job that I have now and I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I still have the same level of freedom. It's remote, but then I work in a little bit of structure. And it's like life changing. So I do think that's such an interesting thing that if it's not done well, we all just fall into like different things. That's so good. That's so interesting. That's awesome. Yeah. So when we're talking about lifestyle and success, like how do you feel like that plays in with your faith and with you being a Christian? How do you work in an industry like the entertainment industry, in the film industry, and doing something that is so abnormal from most people and doing something that they also might say, hey, Hudson, that's super cool for you. Like you work in entertainment, but I'm an accountant. I'm an accountant. I don't have a cool life like you. How do I pursue this kind of success that you're talking about? And as a believer, how can it still be a really enjoyable life?
Yeah, totally. So often when I'm talking to like mixed audiences of people, believer and unbeliever, I'll just leave it at, living a successful life is building a life around what you value. And then when I'm talking to believers, I'll often specify a little bit more that we actually have mandates about what our values should be. So that's the second step. And things that like encourage us. And of course, those inform like the wider world. But often I think believers are like, well, if I'm passionate about this and then I go for it. But you could have like an incorrect value of just like pleasure. And you could build your whole life around that. And you could, in like my earlier definition, live a fulfilling life in the sense that you have fulfilled the value of just pleasure. But I think there's a connection between both your values and making sure that those things that you deeply are rooted in are things that are moral. And so we see that like there's certain moments in Scripture where aspects of this are defined about like aspects of community, aspects of faith, and of gathering together with other believers, and even questions around operating like morally in work that we see. Now, I think sometimes Christians, too often, we see things shown in Scripture, like talking about marriage or talking about kids that are good things that can be good values for many believers, but aren't actually a mandatory value.
Wow.
So the mandatory ones, loving God, loving others, like treating people with respect and
like not murdering.
not murdering. And yeah, exactly.
Literally,
yeah,
like,
yeah. But then there's people who think they start connecting this of like, well, I see this example here that this person gets
wow.
married or they have kids, and so that's the only place that I'm only going to have value if I do that. And then what I've been looking at recently is like people like C.S. Lewis, who gets married in, I believe, his early 60s.
Wow.
And so in many of the ways that we today would say like, oh, well, he wouldn't have made it. Did he have kids? It's like C.S. Lewis has affected millions of people positively for the kingdom.
Like, would you say he's unsuccessful?
Yeah, would you say he's unsuccessful? Like, not at all. And so a lot of the ways that maybe these values that were good things have been forced of like, hey, this is a mandated value that you need. And so I think part of that too is that we don't have, like, in regards to the marriage case in Protestantism, we don't have a lot of good examples of celibate believers, people who say like, I'm so zoned in on the Lord and I'm not going to get married. That sounds wild to us. And sometimes
at least the modern age,
in the modern age, like that seems so wild. And then,
or there's a lot of people, I won't name names, but there's a lot of people that are also like, I'm happily single, da 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 da, but then like, you're like, but are you that, like, and I've heard like stories of like people being like, oh, I'm happily single, but it's like, but you would be married if you could be. Yeah. You're not like, this is a devotion I've made. Yeah. A decision I've made. Yeah, totally. You know, like actually. And
not that at all is a bad desire. No, like that's such a good desire and a good value. It might be something, but it's not the end all of structuring something.
It's so true.
That could really still be like a meaningful and incredible life. Yeah.
It's so true. I love what you're saying about that is such an interesting construct too, because I think the Bible is so holistic, right? And there's so many faithful people in the Bible. There's faithful men, women, there's Job, and there's John. You know, there's like, but everyone's life looks so, and then there's Jesus, right? Yeah. Who everyone's always like, Jesus never got married, you know? And that is such a good point. But I think I love what you said about it's like there's black and white, there's mandatory things that, hey, if you are going to sit here and say, I gave my life to Jesus, he's what I do everything on. There are certain things that we really shouldn't do, you know, that are very clear. But like you said, there's so many lifestyles that are faithful. Yeah. You know, and I think also it's interesting, like if someone is, you know, celibate or not married or marries someone that is passionate, if you want to travel the world and go like minister to everyone you meet, traveling around the world, and that's what you and yourself or you and your husband want to do, like, cool. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's a way that's faithful. You know, we have friends that do that, you know, that they're like travel content creators, and you're like, dude, like, and they go to different churches and they whatever, and I'm like, I think you're being faithful. Like, I think you're doing that, you know. But also there's people that go, you know, they're like, sorry if we're leaving LA, like never traveling again, we're going home, like we're settling down, that's it, period, you know. And they're faithful too, you know, and that's what they want to do. So I love that. I think also, you know, you can tell people about this, but me and Hudson are both from the South. We're from Texas. And I think the culture there heavily, I would love your take, but is like, this is the right way of life. Yeah. Like, this is the lifestyle that all the other lifestyles might be okay, but this is best. Yeah. Like, what would you say to that? Because like, I think we're saying that's not true. Yeah, you know? Totally.
And it's like, there are things that are better at certain times for certain people. And that's what's difficult. Or if like if someone's just like chilling on their couch, like playing video games and 30 and doesn't do anything else. And then their parents like, come on, get out there. You should do something. Like, their parents probably not wrong. And of like, hey, there's certain things that would be better than, not that video games are bad. I love them. I sound like an
we're
old
not saying
person.
that
either. So there are things that are that way. But a lot of the expectations around like, hey, this is exactly how you have to do it. Like in regards to like living your life and getting married at this age and doing these things, there is moments where it's like, I'm skirting responsibility and therefore not considering marriage, and I'm going to extend some relationship that I shouldn't. That would just, and of course in that action, there's probably some like
it really comes down to issues. The heart. I feel like, you know what I mean? Like everyone's stake, but it's like someone, pastor at home told me always, like, when sin's not involved, sometimes you just get to choose. Yeah. Like, if you're not sinning, like, if you're running from something, if you're, you know, if you're actively walking in sin in
Yeah.
some way, maybe not even something crazy, like, but just like I'm avoiding or I'm, you know, I'm avoiding or I'm unhappy or I'm not talking to my community, I'm unhappy, yada, 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 and it's causing me to live a certain lifestyle. That's different. But if you're just genuinely like, I just want to be faithful and I'd prefer to live by the beach and I can afford to live by the beach, like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I don't think there's like a no, you
Yeah.
have to stay here and work this exact, you know, like I just don't know if that's true. But anyway, that's just what I was thinking. I think it's so interesting there. But I think it's interesting for us, and the marriage thing is really interesting.
Yeah.
It's so interesting too to just meet people that get married later, get married sooner. Yeah, the whole thing's really interesting. Well, it's kind of going a different direction, but I'm not mad about it. I'm curious for you.
Yeah.
We'll kind of just jump. I'm kind of gonna jump around, but I'm curious on that. Like, how do you feel about, you know, we talk about, it's kind of a hot take, but how do you feel about like the idea of men providing for women and like women either working or, you know, being a mom and working, or men working only or being a stay-at-home dad? Like, I'd love to know your take on
totally
provision and what you think that means.
Totally. So if we can try to get to like the root of like what's the call and what's the idea, the rooted real, what's the root of it, and like the value that should be held in that relationship, because I think too often as believers we will take some like macho Christianity or macho like almost like conservatism and then fuse that with the faith, and those things aren't actually supposed to be fused. And so people will say something like, oh, if you're like, oh, it's like yelling at people that it's somehow unbiblical if a dad is a stay-at-home dad or something there. So I'll like build a little bit of like, okay, what are the principles that we see in scripture that there is an expectation that it is the like husband's responsibility to make sure that the house is like taken care of financially. Now, what that doesn't mean is that he has to make the most money. It means that if there was a situation where the wife, she has 2 kids and she like she can't work, and it's like, and the husband like loses his job, he goes out and gets another one. He sacrifices his passion in a cruciform way, a way that like is the cross. He sacrifices what's best for his desires for his wife. But that doesn't mean at situations, which I see this all the time, that's super healthy, is what's awesome about marriage is you can combo in ways that you couldn't before. So it makes sense. Husband, he's going to finish schooling to get his master's at home while he takes care of one of the kids. And then if the wife is able to work for a little bit, and then all of a sudden if she wants to have another kid, and then he's able to get his job now that he has his master's. So it's able to be this partnership. Now, if any point they were in financial struggle, he goes, it is my responsibility to figure out and make sure that you are financially cared for, that we have a roof over our head. And if that means that I'm dropping my master's to go pursue construction for this moment to make sure that you are taken care of, that's his responsibility. But that doesn't mean at every point in the relationship that somehow he has to make more money, because there's a lot of like ego and like a masculine macho
like toxic
idea
masculinity,
in there. Totally. But there's like, so it can be a place where it's like, hey, if the husband's making 80 a year and the wife's making 100 a year, and then she says, like, I want to pull back, and he's like, okay, how can we do this responsibly and continue to do that? There's no like comparison or fighting. It's all about it is his responsibility first to self-sacrifice himself for the betterment of the unit and the family.
And it's like if someone is like, oh yeah, like I just want to stay home so I don't have to work and I don't like, you know, and it's not, and it's being lazy. I would argue that's the same as the guy playing video games in his mom's basement. You know what I mean? Like, that's the same. Like, okay, married or not, even, like, that's just there's a work ethic issue here, right? But in reality, like you said, I think it's so good. I just think there's this expectation that the man should make more or do more, and you know, I feel like I'm someone that like I love to work, you know, and like I just don't want to ever. And also, I think with different industries too, like someone, you know, what if someone is, you know, got their degree in teaching and you know they're an awesome teacher, but I don't know, I would love your take on this. This isn't on the list, but there's this idea too of like what is actually provision, right? Because it's like provision might not be luxury.
Totally. Yeah.
And like, I think there's a false, and I will like be the first one to raise my hand and be like, yeah, a lot of women are like, it'd be cool to like not have to work and like have a nice life. And like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying women don't probably like desire that to some extent. And this is like not to call, I mean, it kind of is to call people out, but it's like, hey, if a man can provide, obviously you don't want to be like scraping pennies, but it just might not be the life you like see on TikTok.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like, is it even right though to desire anything more than provision, right? Yeah. I would just love your take on that, because I feel like that's something I've been wrestling with recently, and I don't have a good answer for yet, but I just have been like, wow, I really want to I want to desire what God desires, and I want to value what God values. And I feel like God values financial provision, but also like Jesus was born in Bethlehem and not in a you know what I mean? He had nothing, you know? And it's like, who am I to be like, I want to live in a big farm in the middle of, I want 20 acres. Like, is that right? I don't know. It's just interesting. Totally. Like, what is correct for the woman to desire, but also like what really is provision, right?
Yeah, totally.
That's loaded.
Sorry. 20 acres. That's a lot.
Like, but there's some people that like, I've talked to a lot of women who are like, oh, like provision looks this way.
Yeah, totally.
And it's like, whoa, like, no, it's just interesting.
I
didn't put this on the list.
No, an idea in there. One is that sometimes there's two elements of I'm attracted to a person that actually goes and gets stuff done. Right. And so there's that element of I want someone who's actually making some sort of impact. Right. I think that's like super valuable. Right. You should never like be you should probably never, I'm trying to not be, after I went on a long spiel about not being so hard on everything, you should probably not be with somebody that you feel like doesn't have a vision for the future. Right. Now, that totally can mean, like, my parents got married and then, like went to the mission field right away for that, for a short period. And it was like, both of them came from wealthier parents than the life that they lived, that they chose to live and prioritize. And so I think there's like, of course, being clear with those expectations up front. Yeah, and if that's an important thing. It's good. And then if you're talking to and then also the realization that sometimes the thing that's most attracted to you about them, like building and like they're out here conquering, might be one of the more difficult aspects for your like relationship in the future. Yeah. And so it is one of those of, oh, I want this big thing. Great. How are they going to get that? By not spending time around you. Right. And so there's a phrase that I hear a decent bit from like people talking about like husbands that make a lot of money and then they go out and they come back. And the wife's like, I don't care about your money. I care about you. And I don't have you right now because they're out there in that way. Yeah. And so that's the like wrestling that we have to do is like, hey, do I want, and that's you thinking, considering your values. And there's probably some things that are like, maybe there's some things that are idols in there of like, I need to be this way. Right. But there's also like a healthy desire of like, I want to feel like safe and cared for and protected. Yeah. That's good. That's good. No, I think that's a great answer. I think you're so right. I think it's like you said, like what is success? It goes back to the success, right? Like what is it you want? Like some people, and ideally you want, if you're desiring marriage, you want companionship and want to do life with someone and build, and it's just that's a great answer. I think that's awesome, and that's a good pivot. I think somewhere you bring a lot of value is talking about money. Like I think talking about money just in the church in general and around Christians is like pretty dicey, like I think it's something that I didn't grow up talking about a lot, and I didn't grow up in the church, so that wasn't even for that reason. And I don't know how you feel, but I feel like our generation does talk about it like I don't know if it's less or more, but in like a different way than our parents talk about it. Like my parents, who I love, and like my mom, who is so financially wise, stable, wise, like she knows what she's talking about. Yeah. But my mom's like, frugal, more like frugal this way. And I feel like me and a lot of our generation, I know you're not totally this way, but are more like
whatever, like by all the TikToks,
Yep.
money comes back, the
Yeah.
trip never does, like, and
Yeah.
I'm like guilty of this, right? Like this is Carlie on a tee,
Yeah.
like money comes back, the trip never does, you'll never be 22 in Bali with your friends again. Like, how do you balance, like, that is true, but also like, but you have to provide for yourself for the next, like 50
totally.
years. So like, just, yeah, how do you think, like, we as believers how do you feel like we as Christians should steward our money?
Yeah, totally.
And do that well.
There's like, as always, the two like full pendulum people on one side that probably need to hear one thing and people on one side. Like me, I come from like, I'm very much a saver.
Yeah.
And in that there can be this like belief in I can self-sustain myself. If I save enough, then I'm somehow like, it can be an idol of I feel so much safety and peace that I don't need God. So so it's like this hoarding and this like hoarding of wealth with a desire of almost like elevating myself.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, you have people that say like, oh, like everything's meaningless. So like, let's just spend, let's just go. Let's make it happen. And then they're in a place where like, they're just like being so unwise with their money that they can't be effective tools for the kingdom of God, which happens a lot where it's like, oh, I'm spending so much, but I just can't figure out like how to like tithe or support my church. A lot of people, Christians, they're like, oh yeah, I just need to do more of these like personal, like growth style faith activities. I need to pray more. I need to do more solitude. I'm all for it, but then like when it comes to like, I need to support my local community, oh, well, we're like tight right now, like I'm not sure if I can
or
make
I'll
that
give
happen.
my time. And I'm so guilty of this. Like, I'm so guilty of being like, oh, I'll give my time.
Yeah, I'll give my time. I'll show up. I'll invite people. But when it actually comes to like someone has to keep
when push comes to shove,
someone has to keep the building open.
Yeah.
Yep. And so one of like things that has like redeemed some of my work that I feel like is like, I call it like morally neutral work when I'm working on a project that I'm just like, there's just seems like there's no value to what I'm doing. I'm creating some sort of ad or something that isn't like fulfilling in some way. One of the exciting aspects is like part of this money is going to help make sure that my church is still open. And so it actually like gives you purpose in moments of like, I get to support different believers across the world and get to make sure my church is like able to care for people by doing this thing that's not necessarily inherently fulfilling, but its output is
That
fulfilling.
is so good. That is so good. Sorry, that's really good. I haven't ever thought about it like that. I haven't ever thought about how, like you said, that is so good, because I also think, like, how often do we just think everything we do is so unfulfilling? But in reality, it's like, we all know we're, right, like we're talking about success, we're talking about purpose, and maybe the thing you do is purposeful, but like you said, it still becomes work. But if your work can then create purpose with the paycheck you get, it's literally like this cycle of like, oh, if I can honor the Lord in my work and then honor the Lord with what my work gives me, like that fuels itself, I feel like. And that is really good. I've never thought about that.
And I think
really good.
Like we're dealing with this more now where people want their work to be totally fulfilling.
Wow.
And this is actually probably a symptom of increased choice. So we've gotten increased choice in every aspect of life, in aspect to picking partners, in aspects of which work we choose. And then as a result, we've become more unsatisfied with all of these categories because humans don't actually like choice. It sounds like I'm about to go into some long, strange rant, but in a lot of ways, and it's not like we can reverse it. It's not like, well, okay, so I'm going to make courting happen. It's just like the way that the world is right now. But in many ways, like choice is awesome because it gives you freedom and it gives you like option to choose versus, we watch every movie from, the Victorian era. And it's like, I do not want to be the king or whatever. Right. Like, and there's all of that. So, but now we're expecting these things that used to be given to us to now we select them and then have to like these fulfill our identity. And so we think, okay, I have to make this every moment inherently meaningful. And the person that's like working like a job consistently that they've done so they can support their kids so that they can go home and like their wife can be with their kids, like that can be fully fulfilling even in the fact that the work itself is not something that initially aligned with their passion. Because
Yeah.
one thing that I've seen recently is when you ask people what their passion is, especially a lot of like younger people, the majority of people can't actually articulate it, or they say
Wow.
4 or 5 things. And so when you do, just I'm gonna pursue my passion, I'm gonna make this happen, and then you show up and it's not fulfilling. So I've tried to like switch that on its head of like sometimes the fulfilling nature of it is the fact that with getting money, you can support the things that you're passionate about and support the things that you find meaningful.
It gives you the life that you want to live, you know, and that is what is passionate about it. That's so good. I think we've talked about these high level things, but do you have any like practical, if to whoever, to me, to whoever, and like just so everybody know, like I feel like I've taken so much of what you've told me. I feel really lucky. I have Hudson's phone number. I get to call him and bother him and say, I don't know what I'm doing. Should I take this job? Is this enough money? How do I pay taxes?
Yeah, totally.
Like all the things. Yeah. But to people at home that are just like, man, like money's hard. Passion is hard. Like I feel stuck maybe. Or you're in a job that's either unfulfilling, but like it's not the time to leave, or just whoever for as broadly as possible, whatever situation they're in. What does it look like to like be faithful at work for the sake of God, like for the sake of the kingdom? And obviously there's these obvious answers, right? It's like share the gospel with your coworkers and like love people, but it's like, what does it realistically look like to, it's that verse, it's like, you know, like we are like steward the gifts, like we all have gifts, and maybe you're not even using your gifts, but like how can you use your gifts even if, because I also think people are like, I'm gifted in singing, so I have to be a singer. It's like, that's not necessarily true, right? Like you might be gifted in writing. You might be a storyteller that, you know, you might be a writer that writes songs and can sing, you know what I mean? Because also there's some people that can sing and can't write, you know? It's like, I feel like I'm gifted in people. Like I feel like I'm gifted in building community, like in-person community building, talking to people. That is what I'm gifted in. I could do like 8 to 25 really cool things with that. And sometimes I literally want to quit my job. I work on a computer. Sometimes I want to go quit my job and wait tables because I love that. Like I love like the meeting and the, oh my gosh, how are you? I love that. I eat that up. And sometimes I'm like, man, waiting tables like would be super fulfilling for me, you know? So whether you're waiting tables or, you know, working crazy, I'm just curious, like, what does it practically look like to like be faithful there, you know?
And serve Jesus in those moments.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's going to depend on your specific industry, how you can impact other people.
Totally.
Since I'm like freelance, so part of that means that most of the film industry it's kind of like summer camp. Every time you have a project, a bunch of people come together, you're like, oh, we're good friends, and then you were gone, right? And then you're like,
haven't seen you in so long.
It's like, I'll see you next quarter if the brand like re-ups the project or something.
Right.
And so for me, a lot of that looks like the hierarchy of a film set and the film industry is one that ranks people real quick. There's a clear caste system in the film industry of like, this is the director, here's how we approach them, this is the people, and these are the lower people, and this is a PA. And so part of it is that I find really important is one, like communicating with respect. In my industry, my role is like historically one that's not respectful as a first assistant director. Often people are yelling. And the thing is, how do I both be an effective communicator, like operate in a way that gets my job done, but also that doesn't devalue individuals like humanity? And that happens a lot on sets where a PA will be disregarded. I was on one project with a big kind of music artist. There was a couple of like extras who just like showed up, and no one like treated them like humans in the same way that everyone else was being treated. And when you start seeing the world through the way Jesus did, of everyone having individual like infinite value, then you're seeing Zacchaeus in the tree, and you're also seeing the rich young ruler over here and talking to him, and the woman that's bleeding, and you're able to see those people and maybe spending like caring and approaching those people like humans. And that's like for my industry, where like you might work in an industry where like everyone is treated like humans here, but it's just the way that the entertainment industry is structured.
But I bet in corporate world, that's totally the case. You know,
people
the
are
new
disregarding.
Intern regards different than the big COO that runs the meeting. I mean, I think that correlates of like, as Christians, we have a responsibility to value everyone equally, you know, and see, that's so good. And I think knowing like, hey, like we should treat people the same, you know, and being faithful to like do that. That's really good.
And part of it, it's like everyone, if you asked on a film set, should we treat everyone equal? Everyone would be like, yeah.
Of course.
But what's happened is often work has built these structures or institutions that make your brain like just start disregarding people really quick. And it's just the system that you've placed yourself in of like, this person's the important person. These people are unimportant. And then, so we actually have to push in to actively fight the way that the structure has been set up so that we make sure that those people are still respected and that we care for and that we can build like pockets of heaven and be able to represent who Jesus is to those people.
That's really good, man. That's really good. I think it's just really interesting, like, I don't know, being Gen Z and being in this new day and age of like, it's really interesting. Okay, I have like 2 more questions.
Great.
Well, I have one more like kind of high level, and then I have I don't know, these are really good though. Okay, and then I have a segment at the end that I haven't found a name for yet. We'll get to that in a second. My last big thing is, but stay tuned for the segment because it's gonna be funny, is just like if you want to give us a high level, like how do you feel like, you know, you do so many things, Hud, and we know Hudson's always telling me he has to convince people he doesn't wake up at 5 a.m. Like, that's not who you are, you know? You're not like this, like, superhuman.
Yeah, totally.
Who's the guy? Did you see the trend with the ice face guy? Like, you're not the, like, that guy. That's not you at all, you know? And I just would love to just hear practically, too, like, how do you feel like you balance, you know, being really faithful in your work and pursuing, you know, being, you know, letting your excellence be your evangelism in a lot of ways, like doing that well. And then also like balancing your relationships in the church and just all these other projects that you're doing. Like, how do you feel like you balance those things and adequately allot time there?
Yeah, totally. And part of that comes down to like, there is ways to be faithful and those to look very different in other people's life. So if I show something, it's like, hey, here is the way like my schedule is.
Doesn't mean everyone should do it.
And like comparing like Paul's journey as a missionary that's traveling to different churches, his approach to consistency and community and his approach to tithing and work is going to look really radically different, but he's still able to be faithful in that. And that's why C.S. Lewis's look so different, and then that's why mine will look so different. And there's still a way to be faithful in that. And there's still probably a call for all 3 of us. I'm not sure how I just grouped myself in this category.
With Paul.
Paul and C.S. Lewis and Hudson.
Hey, and Hudson,
you know?
Here for it one day.
But there's calls for each of us in different ways to live more faithful in those values.
So good.
And so
it's kind of like you said, like having the right moral structure of like what's important.
Yeah,
I think is good. But I think that because there is also this culture, I feel like, of so and so, like Logan Paul does this every day, Elon Musk does this every day. If I just do it like him, the 5 a.m. club, if I just do it like him, but then you do a little bit of research and you're like, actually, my Oura ring says that my circadian is best between midnight and 9 is when I should sleep. Yeah. That if I actually just try to wake up at 5 a.m., my body's like not going to be down. I could do it for a year and it just will I mean, maybe, but like, so I think that's a really interesting point that you're saying, that there is not a one size.
There is not a one size, but there is like principles that like are really important. So you can, and this is why I think the local community and being under pastoral leadership is so important, because we often are like trying to solve that ourselves. And it's often through people pointing into your life like, hey, you're actually fine the way you're running this right now. Like, I know you feel like you're like really busy. I understand where you're at, and this phase is all right for where you're headed. And having pastoral leadership being able to say that, or look at you and say, hey, are you really going to make this decision? You think this is the most wise? Because there's a lot of questions about wisdom that aren't right or wrongs, but are like, this is actually gonna, like, you're gonna have to deal with this in the future, because you're being unwise with things. So, for me, there's like a lot of prioritization of like local community, you know, like attending a gathering with fellow believers, like talking to believers, and like, of course, reading the word and praying and approaching that. But that looks different, like has looked different for different seasons of my life too.
Yeah.
Like the way my groups meet right now, I'm with 4 guys, and it's 5 of us, and we talk and work through stuff. And previously it was like 10 and 15. People always want this like specific model of how it's supposed to operate.
Yeah,
but I think sometimes the way that it's not perfectly designed, like, oh, I need to do this in regards to action, is because I need to live in this way, and how do I submit myself to
so good.
Leadership that is trying to deal with these questions for my specific culture, on how we're going to approach questions of worship or questions of community. And LA looks really different than a lot of places.
Totally. That's really good. And and I think everyone's pace of life is going to really impact that, and your family situation and everything. That's really good. Dang, that's really good. Okay, this last segment, I don't have a name. I was telling Allie, I think like, I don't know, it's so cringe, but like spicy spirituality or something like I don't know, like obviously the whole podcast is like, sorry, this keeps like touching the chair, but the whole podcast is like kind of like supposed to be like hot takes, I guess, but couple ones that we can just not like rush through, but can just like kind of, I'd love your take on. We went through some of them, but okay, because you're a guy, me and Allie were being girly and like whatever, but you're a guy, Hudson. Let us into the Christian guy brain.
Will.
Okay, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, Hudson, what's with and Hudson has a girlfriend, by the way. We love you, Joy Kelly, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I've been gone, so I was just double checking.
We're doing great.
Okay, great. We love you, Joy Bell. Anyway, but Hudson has a girlfriend, so I feel like you can speak to this because you know, somehow got a girlfriend, unlike the rest of LA.
I can talk to why that is. But.
That's another podcast. But okay, what is your take on he likes my story? Is he flirting?
Yes, he's probably flirting, but that doesn't mean like there are people that flirt with a lot of people.
Whoa.
And so that's like the weird thing.
That's so true.
Right? There's like guys that are like,
I think girls do this too.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, we're like and flirting is often just like it's like testing, like it's like jousting a a bit. There's like, let me see
Suss
like how they
out.
respond. Yeah, totally. Because of our strange culture that's all based around choice, right? And so if he's liking your story, he's probably flirting, unless he's like over like 40. If anyone's over 40 and it's like one of your like parents' friends, they don't know how social works.
They don't understand.
But someone that's like probably our age,
yeah, for sure. That's so interesting too, because I feel like dating in 2025 is just crazy. Yeah, like I feel like, and also the different cultures, especially coming from the South versus here.
Yeah.
And Hudson like found literally Joy is the best. Like I just feel like, man, I always tell the story, but I will never forget. I was like, Hudson, why don't you date Joy?
Yeah, that was
and he was like, he said, I don't know. And I claim he said no, because I heard I don't know, I heard no.
Yeah.
You said I don't know, but I heard no in my head. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense.
Because I can't let Carlie in on things, because Carlie is awesome as an information distribution machine. So if I ever need the public to know something, I'll just share it with Carlie. She'll make sure people know.
I'll make sure
I was holding
But I get excited.
I get excited.
And so I'll be like, oh my gosh, like, I'm just going to date Joy Kelly. And then everyone's like,
babies at home and 20 acres in Nashville. Yeah, that happens. So you got to be careful.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to cry. It's so funny. Okay, we need to wrap up. This is getting out of hand. Okay, my last question that I would love your take. We're getting Hudson dating advice right now, guys. This is like this is a gold mine.
Oh,
this is a gold mine.
Sorry,
this
everyone.
is a gold mine. It's a gold mine.
Yep.
Okay. He's a Christian. He loves God, but I don't think he's attractive.
Yep.
But he's like he's perfect in every way, but I don't find him attractive. Maybe he's objectively attractive. But I'm like he's not cute, or like I'm not attracted. Like, what do you think what do you think we're supposed to, like, what's your take?
Yeah, here's my take.
Come on. Oh my gosh, you have a take.
Here's my take.
Okay. And hold on, I'm going to say it one more time. He's a Christian, but I don't find him attractive. What do I do?
2 things. 1, attraction is incredibly important for a healthy relationship. And I think too often people think like, oh, I can just disregard that.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden be like in a fine place. No. So 1, attraction is incredibly important. 2, attraction change and fluctuates.
Wow.
And so often, it's like the classic like parent advice of like, oh, give them one shot or go on a date. Part of attraction is going to be on the context in which you first meet them.
Wow.
And so like Joy thought I was an incredibly serious person first time she met me, because it was like at a worship night and I'm like up there talking very serious.
He is serious.
I'm just like serious. And then she was like, oh, I met you in this other context and you were really goofy. And so I think giving
which is what you're like most of the time.
Which is who I am most of the time. Exactly. And so what I think giving an opportunity to see them in a different context. So if they ask you out, I would be like, okay, let me give it a shot. Part of this is that there's so much pressure, especially in the Christian community, around those first dates and first interactions of like, oh my goodness, like, okay, can I start planning my life? Like, how's it going to be? How's it going to work? And there's so much pressure. And it's like, no, what this is for is so that we can see each other in different contexts. So that I can see if I like certain aspects of you in different contexts.
And it could change based on those contexts.
Yeah. And so sometimes you'll see someone and be like, oh, okay. Like, but there are people that you know, like, you're just like, I won't be attracted to this person. And I know. Tell them no.
Yeah, it's good.
And but if there's any inkling of like, oh, maybe, let me go on a date with him. Like,
like suss it out.
Yeah, but don't.
But if you know, you shouldn't have to feel pressure that you have to give it a shot.
No, and there are things that objectively look great on paper in regards to relationships. Love is confusing, and it doesn't make sense, and it might take time. So it might be that you find him attractive in 5 or 6 years, and it's like a Benny Blanco situation, you know. But it,
Love you so much.
and then you're like, yeah, let's do this. But saying like, oh yes, like this. Oh, I feel so much pressure because it's this way, and there are people who are too far on one side of like my standards, or like you got to be 6'6".
They're like unrealistic.
Yeah, they're unrealistic, and it's like 6'6" and makes like more than 200K. It's like you're at 0.00% of the population. But at the same time, there's people who are like, well, I guess that hold their values so low that they're like, oh, I don't really like, I'm not really attracted.
Not really interested, but I guess I'll give it a shot because like he asked.
Yeah, and I think there's like, it's not a bad thing to be like, okay, I'll give you a shot.
Because I feel like I'm kind of like that. I'm kind of like if someone but I also think it's a cultural thing because I think if I still lived in Texas, like if I full time, like if I was living there for like the foreseeable future, I would be much more hesitant to say yes to a date with a guy. But in LA,
totally,
people ask out people way less. Totally. And so if I get asked out in LA, I'm like, sure,
let's do it.
Let's give it a go, because like no one asks people out in LA. But in Texas, like I go home for 1 week and like 3 people are like, you're kind of fine. Like you're trying to go out, and it's like, oh, like maybe not, like maybe I'm not. And that's not against those people. I'm just saying the culture's so different.
Totally.
So I also think that's not talked about enough of like, are you being asked out? Like what is the culture around dating? Because if the culture is, we don't really ask people out, we do it with pretty deep intention. Like in LA, I feel like it's pretty casual, and if someone asks you out, they must really be into you, I feel like. And in Texas, it's more like like I go on dates. People go on more dates, and that's more clear. So I think it depends contextually too.
Culture is huge, and even small subcultures like Christian community in LA is so different than general LA. And so and in same way like certain aspects of the Christian bubble in Texas. And so part of it is you just being aware of like, okay, what am I saying by so a lot of current cultures in our age, there's like a pre-date coffee that's not referred to as a date. It's like, hey, you want to grab coffee? Right, that exists before the first date. I'm just explaining how it is, not what it really, and that not how it should be, but how it is. It's like, okay,
can't tell you how many of those I've done.
Yeah, so you go and you get coffee, and that's part of the like, okay, it's a little bit of sussing out before, because in certain times there's cultures that date language feels like it has certain weight to it.
Right.
So I'm going to be really careful not to use the date language
unless I'm really legit, because they think we're getting married if I go on a date. Yeah.
Versus like maybe 20 years ago in a different context that would look totally different, of like,
let's go to dinner. It's fine.
Let's go on a date to dinner, and it would just be like that would be the phrasing for it. And so all of it is so like arbitrary and formed by the culture and shifting so heavily of like, oh no, I wouldn't do that. So just being like respectful to other people, being like relatively clear, not being over the top at the beginning, and like, hey, part of the goal of this thing is to suss it out. Like,
that's okay. There's no pressure. Like it can really be fun and chill.
And I think that's
But intentional.
But intentional. That's the hard part from like the male side is there's this like call to be both intentional, but then there was like this big overshift if it was just like, oh, I want to marry you, you know, kind of that you would hear like early first and second dates.
And then girls are freaking out.
And then girls are freaking out. Or you hear that and then they're still
God
conflicted.
told me you're my wife.
Oh,
bad. Guys, if there's a line.
No. God didn't tell her to be your wife. I don't know who told you, but
it wasn't God.
Probably not.
Yeah.
He may have, but I'm going to say
funny.
very unlikely.
So funny.
That's another hot take of God probably doesn't care about who you marry, but how you marry.
Come on,
and your game plan.
Okay, I fear that we might have to have Hudson back one of these days, but wow. I mean, I think that's so good. I think that's such a good take, and I don't think it's talked about enough. That's why I wanted to ask you, because I feel like you have lots of good advice. Anyway, guys, sorry, Hudson not single. Sorry to break it to everybody, but you can follow him on Instagram for his amazing content, and he talks about how to live a fulfilling life at Hudhop on IG. We'll put the description below. But yeah, I think that's anything else.
That's it.
Thanks
so much, Carlie.
Oh
this was a blast. This was awesome.
I think this is better than last.
Yeah, it was when we did the last one, it was late, so this is great.
Anyway, well, thank you guys for tuning into The Rooted Real. We will see you next time, and have a great week.
Make sure, like, comment, subscribe.
Like, comment, subscribe.
Share. We really need shares. You can share it.